My name is Mike Reynolds, and I'm a regular Joe who thought he had the American dream nailed down. Married for 7 years to Jessica, a feisty 29-year-old who still turned every head when we walked down the street, I believed we were solid. Turns out, I was dead wrong. This July, I discovered she'd been getting her kicks elsewhere, with a so-called friend of hers, no less. The shit hit the fan one humid evening when suspicions drove me to snoop through her phone. What I found was a gut punch. Texts from just the day after she'd jumped into bed with him, bragging about their wild escapades, exchanging I love yous like they were damn teenagers, and the cherry on top, mocking a recent spat we'd had. They had a good laugh over my expense. My blood boiled reading those words. I had tried convincing myself that maybe we were just settling into that comfortable stage of marriage where the fire simmers down to a warm glow. But hell, Jessica was convinced we were on the rocks, despite what seemed like decent days filled with lively chats and what I thought was good sex. Little did she know I was already talking to a lawyer ready to cut ties. This wasn't her first rodeo either. She'd pulled this crap when we were dating, leading to a 6-month break before I caved and took her back. We even tied the knot after that mess. I'd told her straight. If she ever cheated again, we were done. No second chances. Fast forward to now, and here we were again. Only this time she'd become colder over the past year, shrugging off my attempts at affection. Guess that was her gearing up to stab me in the back. I had the divorce papers ready to rock, just ticking down the days. Meanwhile, Jessica was on a guilt trip, suddenly all sweet and homely this week, scrubbing dishes, cooking up storms, avoiding any real help from me. It was like she was punishing herself or maybe trying to scrub away her own guilt. But in my eyes, she was a traitor, plain and simple. There was no love there, not anymore. How could there be after she'd turned our bed into a stage for her play? Money-wise, we were okay, but she'd been a leech on finances, barely contributing with her part-time gig that didn't even cover her own expenses. I'd been carrying us both for too long, and honestly, I was over it. Yet despite all the bullshit, part of me ached for what we had, or at least for what I thought we had. I dreaded the fallout of the divorce, especially since I knew it could toss her into a dark place. She wasn't strong, not like she pretended to be, but there was no going back, not this time. 3 days from now, I'd lay it all out, scorched earth style. Turns out, her fling in July was just the tip of the iceberg. She hadn't just cheated with one guy. Oh no, she'd been busy. Since May, she'd been playing house with not one, but 4 different clowns. And the latest Mr. Wonderful? A relationship guru by day and a scumbag by night, preaching the gospel while sneaking around with married women. The irony was so bitter it was almost funny. This guy, who fancied himself a relationship coach, had been feeding Jessica lines about how I was the devil incarnate, trapping her in a loveless prison. He played into her insecurities, painting himself as the hero come to rescue her. What a load of crap. And she bought it all, hook, line, and sinker, thinking she was the damsel in distress in some twisted fairy tale. As for me, I had to admit, I hadn't been the perfect husband. I'm big on self-improvement and always pushed for both of us to be the best versions of ourselves. Jessica, however, had stalled, dropped out of college, lingered in low-paying jobs, and generally resisted any change. For years I nudged her, tried to motivate her to hit the gym with me, pick up a course, just anything to get off the couch. When gentle nudges didn't work, I admit my frustration showed. I got harsh, criticized her for letting herself go. It was wrong, I know that now, and I stopped writing her about it long before she started her affairs. But despite my cutting remarks back then, she stuck around, claimed to love me through it all. Yet now, when I've backed off, she turns to others. It doesn't add up. I used to think we supported each other, but it's clear I've been the crutch in this relationship for too long. Now she's scrambling to cover her tracks, overcompensating with chores and lukewarm affection. But it's too little. Too late. Her betrayal has torn the fabric of our marriage beyond repair. I can't trust her. Not after this circus of lies and deceit. It's just a countdown now. 3 days until I can confront her, lay everything out and watch her facade crumble. What's killing me isn't just the affairs. It's the deceit, the manipulation. She's been painting me as the villain to justify her cheating. Her affair partners eat it up, feeding her lines about how she deserves better. And the current guy? A youth pastor, no less, spinning his web of hypocrisy, talking about saving souls while sneaking around with mine. He even bragged about his manipulative prowess like he's some puppet master pulling her strings. It's disgusting. I've seen texts where she complains about me to him and he coaches her on what to say, how to handle me, as if he knows me, as if he's the expert on my life. It's a sick game to them and I'm the one being played, but not for much longer. I've got the divorce papers ready and soon she'll have a choice to make. Stay in her fantasy world with Mr. Holy Cheater or face the reality she's destroyed. I'm betting she won't find the grass greener on the other side, especially once the truth comes out and her little support system sees her for who she really is. As D-Day approaches, part of me can't wait to see the look on her face when I tell her it's over, to finally get some semblance of justice. But another part dreads the aftermath, the loneliness, the void she'll leave behind, even if it's a toxic one. And then there's the issue of our dog, the one creature I truly want to keep out of this mess. She's crazy about that animal, treats it like the child we never had. But knowing her, she'll fight tooth and nail for him, probably just to spite me. I can't afford a drawn-out legal battle, not over a dog, but thinking of leaving him behind with her, knowing how unstable she is, it breaks my heart. So here I am, caught in a nightmare of loyalty, betrayal, and legal threats, waiting for the bomb to drop. And when it does, I know nothing will ever be the same. But maybe, just maybe, I'll find some peace on the other side of this war. Maybe I'll finally be free to find someone who truly values me, who sees partnership as a two-way street. Until then, I'm just counting down the minutes, ready to close this chapter of my life for good. Days dragged like a bad hangover as I waited to serve Jessica the divorce papers. Despite the betrayal eating at my guts, I couldn't help but get caught up in our old rhythms when she'd flash me those desperate smiles, trying to salvage whatever was left of us. It was a sick dance, one where I knew the music was about to stop, and shit would hit the fan. On one of those nights, the tension between us sparked differently. Jessica came home from work, her demeanor more flirty than guilty, maybe a bit too eager to prove she was still the woman I married. I watched her, this mix of anger and desire churning inside me. She slipped into something more comfortable, a see-through nightie that didn't leave much to the imagination. It was like she was baiting me, testing how far she could push before I broke. And break I did. That night, we didn't just have sex. We fucked, hard, angry, and desperate. It was as if both of us were trying to claim something back, to prove a point. Her nails dug into my back, leaving marks that felt like battle scars. I gripped her thighs, pulling her closer, each thrust a mix of pain and pleasure. It was raw, intense, and probably the most honest we'd been with each other in weeks. Afterward, lying in the wreckage of our sheets, the silence was suffocating. She nestled against my chest, a fragile peace forged in the eye of the storm. Her voice was soft, a whisper meant only for the dark. "Do you still love me, Mike?" I wanted to scream, to rage at her for even asking, but I just lay there numb, the taste of her still on my lips, and whispered back, "I don't know, Jessica. I don't know anything anymore." As the day of reckoning approached, Jessica's antics ramped up. She was all over me, a mix of seductress and the guilt-ridden wife. Meals were her new battlefield, where she tried to win me over with culinary delights, her grandmother's recipes, and a lot of wine. Too much wine. We'd end up drunk, sometimes laughing like old times, but more often than not, it ended in the bedroom. It was messed up, using sex like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but I couldn't deny the pull. It was like watching a house burn down and deciding to roast marshmallows on the flames. 2 nights before I was set to drop the divorce bomb, she tried something new. Dinner was her stage again, only this time, She slipped into something downright sinful right there in the kitchen. Her outfit was a blatant play, all lace and promises, a desperate bid to sway me from the path I was hell-bent on walking. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. Right there, against the cold granite of the kitchen counter, we crossed lines I'd vowed never to redraw. It was furious and a little sad, her moans mixed with sighs that sounded too much like sobs. I hated that I wanted her, even then, hated that she could still do this to me. But the morning after was cold, the sun too bright, and the reality too sharp. I woke up to find her watching me, those big eyes of hers clouded with something like fear, maybe regret. "Mike, can we just forget all this? Start over?" she asked, her voice shaky, hopeful. I couldn't answer her because what was there to say? That I'd seen the texts, knew about the other men, the lies, the betrayal. That in 3 weeks I'd gone from husband to soon-to-be ex, all while pretending the ground wasn't crumbling beneath us. So I got up, showered off the scent of regret, and prepared for the final act. The papers were ready, my resolve set in stone. Today would be the day I'd end this charade, pull the curtain on our little tragedy. And as I watched her from across the room, busy with her chores, throwing me glances filled with a mix of hope and desperation, I steeled myself. It wasn't just about the cheating or the lies anymore. It was about respect, about worth, and damn it, I needed to reclaim mine. She noticed my distance, her brow furrowing as she approached me cautiously. "Is everything okay?" Her voice was tentative, a stark contrast to the confident, almost cocky tone she'd carried before this whole mess blew up. "Just thinking," I muttered, not meeting her eyes because I knew if I did I might falter. "About us, about everything." She reached out, her hand brushing mine, a contact that once would have comforted but now felt like a burn. "We can fix this, Mike. I know we can. Whatever's going on, we can work it out, like we always do," Jessica pleaded, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of the old warmth. I almost laughed, a harsh, cold sound that never quite made it past my lips. Work it out? After everything? The idea was absurd, almost as absurd as the notion that any of this could be brushed under the rug with a few well-cooked meals and nights of wild, desperate sex. "No, Jess, we can't," I said finally, my voice steady, belying the turmoil inside. "This isn't just a rough patch or something small we can fix with a few heart-to-hearts. This is broken, fundamentally broken." Her face crumpled, the reality finally seeming to hit her. "So that's it? You're just giving up on us?" "It's not about giving up," I countered, feeling a pang of guilt for the pain I saw in her eyes, but knowing it was necessary. "It's about facing reality. What we had is gone, Jess. You made sure of that." She recoiled as if I'd struck her, and maybe I had in a way. The truth can cut deeper than any knife. "You don't mean that. You can't," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I do, Jess. And what's more, I know about the affairs, all of them. The texts, the lies, everything." Dropping that bomb felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for too long. Her shock was palpable, her face draining of color. You've known? All this time?" Her voice was barely a whisper, her usual fiery demeanor extinguished. "Yeah, I've known. And in 2 days I'm filing for divorce. It's over, Jessica." The words hung between us, heavy and final. I watched as she struggled to process them, her mind racing to find some way to salvage the unsalvageable. "Please, Mike, please don't do this. I made mistakes, but I love you. I do. We can get past this. I swear we can." Her plea was desperate, her hands reaching for mine, seeking the connection that had once been our lifeline. But it was too late for promises and pleas. The trust was shattered, the love smothered by her deceit. I pulled my hands away, stepping back to put physical distance between us as I prepared to sever the emotional ties that had bound us together for 7 years. "I'll be staying at a hotel until everything's settled. I suggest you think about what you need to do next," I said, my tone more resigned than angry. "And Jess, this isn't just about what you did. It's about respect, honesty, all the things that should have been sacred between us." She nodded. tears streaming down her cheeks, the finality of the situation finally dawning on her. "I'm so sorry, Mike. Truly I am." "Sorry doesn't change what happened," I replied, turning to grab my bag, my movements mechanical. The weight of the impending divorce pressed down on me, heavy and inescapable. As I walked out the door, I didn't look back. The future was uncertain, the path ahead undoubtedly lonely. But it was a path I needed to walk alone, away from the lies and betrayal that had poisoned what we once had. Behind me, I left a broken marriage and a woman who'd once been the center of my world. Ahead lay the daunting task of rebuilding my life from the ground up. It would be hard, maybe the hardest thing I'd ever do. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something like hope flickering in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to be whole again. After leaving Jessica and the ruins of our marriage behind, the first few nights were a blend of relief and deep-seated anger. I bunked down in a dingy motel room, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a crime drama, not where you'd find yourself after your life had imploded. The walls were thin enough to hear every curse and moan from the neighboring rooms, a constant reminder of what I was trying to escape. I drowned my sorrows the way many men do, with whiskey and self-pity. But as the nights dragged on, the solitude became unbearable. My thoughts would spiral, replaying Jessica's betrayals, her lies, and those final desperate pleas for forgiveness. The more I drank, the angrier I got, until the booze no longer numbed the pain. It only sharpened it, focusing my rage into a fine point. One night, driven by a mix of loneliness and residual desire, I found myself at a local bar known for its less-than-reputable clientele and even sketchier hookups. The place was a dive, filled with the kind of desperate energy that comes from people looking to forget their problems at the bottom of a glass or in a stranger's bed. There, amidst the haze of cigarette smoke and the stench of cheap liquor, I met Lana. She was the antithesis of Jessica brash, bold, and with a voracious appetite for destruction. Her eyes held a predatory glint as she sauntered over, her hips swaying with a confidence that was both a challenge and an invitation. "Looks like you could use some company," she purred, her voice low and husky, cutting through the din of the bar. "Maybe I could," I replied, my voice rough with too much whiskey and too little sleep. "Or maybe I just need to forget." "Forgetting's easy," she smirked, sliding onto the stool next to mine. "It's remembering that's hard. So what do you want to forget tonight, handsome?" "My cheating wife," I said bluntly, the words bitter on my tongue. Lana's smile widened, her teeth catching the dim light. "Perfect. I specialize in making bad memories disappear." What followed was a reckless blur. Lana led me back to her place, a cramped apartment that smelled of incense and rebellion. Clothes were shed like old skins, and for a few hours I lost myself in the sheer physicality of someone new. Lana was uninhibited, her movements bold and demanding as she guided me with practiced ease. There was nothing tender about it. It was raw, almost feral, as if we were both trying to exorcise our demons through sheer force of will. Afterward, as I lay in the tangle of sweat-soaked sheets, Lana asleep beside me, I felt a hollow victory. I'd escaped my thoughts, but the relief was temporary. The shadows of my failed marriage still lurked in the corners of my mind, waiting to pounce the moment I let my guard down. The next morning I left before Lana woke, slipping out of her apartment with a silent curse. I was no closer to healing, no nearer to understanding how everything had gone so wrong. If anything, the night with Lana had only deepened the pit inside me. As the day of the final divorce hearing approached, my resolve hardened. I was done with self-pity and temporary fixes. I needed to face Jessica, to close this chapter of my life with dignity, no matter how much it hurt. The courtroom was sterile, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and anxiety. When Jessica walked in, her eyes red-rimmed and her posture defeated, a part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her one last time. But the scars were too deep, the betrayal too raw. We didn't speak as the proceedings unfolded, the judge's voice a distant drone as he reviewed our case. When it came time to finalize the divorce, my voice was steady as I answered his questions, affirming my desire to end the marriage. Jessica's voice cracked as she gave her responses, the sound a sharp stab to my already fragile composure. When it was over, the judge declared us no longer husband and wife. The finality of those words echoed in the empty chambers of my heart. As we left the courtroom, Jessica stopped me. "Mike, I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman I had once loved. "I know," I said softly. "Goodbye, Jessica." Turning away, I walked out of the courthouse alone, the future uncertain but the past finally behind me. The road to recovery would be long and undoubtedly painful, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find peace. Maybe I could learn to trust again. But for now, I would take it one step at a time, rebuilding myself from the ground up. As I stepped into the sunlight, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. Life was waiting, and I was finally ready to live it again on my own terms. The days following the divorce were a blend of freedom and a gnawing emptiness that I couldn't shake off. I was free from the lies, the betrayal, and the heartache, but the void Jessica left behind was palpable. I dove into the single life with a vengeance, hitting bars, hooking up with women whose names I barely remembered the next morning. It was a raw, unfiltered existence, driven by a desire to obliterate the pain with pleasure, or at least the semblance of it. One night, about a month after the divorce was finalized, I found myself at a club known for its underground vibe and the easy availability of both booze and bodies. The place throbbed with bass and dim lighting, bodies grinding against each other in a sweaty, rhythmic chaos. It was there I met Marissa, a fiery redhead with a wild laugh and an appetite for adventure that matched my own. Marissa wasn't like the other women I'd been with since the divorce. She was fierce, unapologetic about her desires, and she challenged me in ways that both infuriated and excited me. That night, after a few too many shots and a lot of dirty dancing, we stumbled back to her apartment, a small cluttered space that smelled like incense and rebellion. Clothes were ripped off in a frenzy, tossed aside without care as we collided in a mess of limbs and lust on her living room floor. It was desperate, intense, and utterly consuming. Marissa knew what she wanted and how to get it, guiding my hands and mouth with a confidence that only fueled my desire more. Our bodies moved together in a frantic dance, seeking release from the buildup of tension that the music and alcohol had stoked to a fever pitch. Afterward, as we lay sprawled on the floor, the afterglow mingling with the stickiness of spilled drinks and sweat, Marissa propped herself up on one elbow and looked at me with a smirk. "You're something else, Mike Reynolds. A real fucking mess, but something else." I laughed, the sound harsher than I intended. "You don't know the half of it." "Oh, I think I do," she replied, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my chest. "You've got that look in your eyes, like you're trying to fuck your way out of a nightmare." Her words stung because they were true. I was trying to outrun my demons, to drown them in a sea of nameless encounters and meaningless sex. But as the weeks turned into months, the futility of my efforts became painfully clear. No amount of physical pleasure could fill the void left by a failed marriage, by the betrayal of someone I had loved so deeply. It was during one of my late-night escapades, another forgettable night in a string of them, that reality finally caught up with me. I was at a bar, a different one this time, nursing a drink and watching the crowd when a couple caught my eye. They were laughing, lost in each other, a stark contrast to the hollow encounters I'd been settling for. Something inside me twisted, a deep, aching pang of loneliness that I couldn't ignore anymore. That night, I went home alone, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway of my apartment. The silence of the place was suffocating, a stark reminder of the isolation I had imposed on myself. I sank down onto the couch, the weight of my choices, my failures, pressing down on me. In the dark, The truth I had been avoiding loomed large. I couldn't keep living like this. The sex, the women, the nights spent chasing oblivion, they weren't healing me, they were hollowing me out, leaving me empty and numb. The following morning, I woke up with a resolve that felt foreign but firm. I needed to change, to find a way back to something resembling happiness, or at least peace. I started small, reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I had neglected, filling my days with more than just work and my nights with more than just empty encounters. Slowly, life began to take on color again. I wasn't healed, not completely. Some wounds were too deep, the scars too permanent, but I was learning to live with them, to build something new on the ruins of what had once been. Months later, I met someone. Not in a bar or through a haze of alcohol, but in the park of all places. Her name was Ellie, and she had a smile that could light up the darkest of days. We started slow, a coffee here, a movie there. It was gentle, a quiet kind of healing that I hadn't known I needed. With Ellie, I found a different kind of intimacy, one built on trust and mutual respect, not just physical desire. It wasn't fiery or fraught with the intensity of my past with Jessica or the fleeting encounters that followed. Instead, it was steady and reassuring, a warmth that grew with each shared laugh and every quiet moment spent together. As our relationship deepened, I found myself opening up about my past, the pain, and the path that led me to her. Ellie listened, her eyes kind and understanding, her hand squeezing mine in silent support. It was the first time I had spoken of my divorce without a bitter edge to my voice, the first time I realized just how far I'd come. One evening, as we walked through the park where we'd first met, Ellie stopped by the lakeside, the city lights reflecting like stars on the water's surface. "You know," she began, her voice thoughtful, "everyone has scars, Mike, some more visible than others. What matters is how we heal, how we grow from the pain." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman who had walked into my life by chance, but the person who might just be my chance at a future. "I think I'm finally starting to heal," I admitted, the truth of it settling in my chest like a promise. Ellie smiled, that radiant smile that had first drawn me in, and leaned in to kiss me. It was soft and sweet, a seal on our unspoken commitment to take this journey together, no matter where it led. In the months that followed, life with Ellie wasn't just good. It was real. We had our challenges, of course, but we faced them together, a united front built on trust and the deep, abiding love that had grown between us. She taught me that love wasn't just about passion or even companionship. It was about acceptance, about seeing the flaws in another person and loving them not in spite of those flaws but because of them. Eventually, we moved in together, blending our lives and our dreams into a shared space that felt like home in a way my house with Jessica never had. It was filled with laughter and light, with the mundane moments that make up a life and the extraordinary ones that make it worth living. One night, as we lay in bed, the moon casting a gentle glow across our room, Ellie turned to me and whispered, "Thank you for letting me into your heart, for letting me help heal it." I pulled her close, feeling the rightness of her presence, the peace that had settled over my life since she became a part of it. "No, Ellie," I murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for being my reason to believe in love again." As I drifted off to sleep, Ellie's steady breathing a comforting rhythm in the quiet night, I realized that while the road to recovery had been long and fraught with shadows, it had also led me to her, to this love, to this new beginning. I was grateful not just for Ellie, but for the journey itself, for all the painful lessons and the unexpected blessings. And though I knew the future was uncertain, filled with its own potential heartaches and joys, I was no longer afraid to face it. Because I knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together, with our hands clasped tight and our hearts open, ready for whatever life had in store.